All right, we're back, folks, and I want to continue my little series here, my little series about the age of AI and automation and the skills that never-ending skills that are going to be required to ha to be successful in this new age of automation and AI. We've talked about critical thinking is going to be a skill that's in high demand that everyone should start really thinking about. How do I develop? It needs to be developed. You need to continue to practice it. And critical thinking is about the ability to assess information that you've been received and look at it from different perspectives, including different biases. We all have our own biases, and we might not like to think about it, but we do. We have all have our biases. I have my biases. I'm biased towards technology. I'm biased towards analytics. I'm biased towards anything new and cool, right? I love all that great stuff. So critical thinking is going to be a skill that you have to have. There's no negotiating. Complex problem solving. Again, everyone thinks they're a great complex problem solver. Bring it to me. I'll tell you the answer. Complex problem solving requires great critical thinking, but it also requires the ability to define a problem well. Understand how you're going to measure that problem. How do we objectively measure that problem? And when we talk about measurements, there's interesting perspectives associated with how do we measure that data appropriately. It talks about how do we analyze it for root causes that we're talking about in that problem statement that we've listed. How do we identify improvements of all the improvements that exist? How do we identify those improvements? And how do we look at those improvements and decide which ones to implement? And then, of course, we're talking about understanding how to put systems in place to control or reduce the potential of a defect or an error or problem from reoccurring. Complex problem solving, a lot of people think they're great at it, but comes hard to some people. And that's one of the things we teach right I teach Lean Six Sigma at OpEx 90, and we teach critical thinking, how to think broadly about someone that is bringing something to you and think about it objectively, understanding your bias. How do we do complex problem solving using statistics, using data, right? So the next thing is we had critical thinking, complex problem solving, right? Everyone has it. Next one's data literacy, right? How literate are you data literate? Do you understand how to communicate with data? Can you get data, share that information, and communicate it in a way that's meaningful? Data literacy also includes statistical thinking, understanding what variations in that data, understanding what you can expect and the likelihood of events, right? So data literacy is not just getting the data, bringing it together, doing all this wonderful stuff that I love to do. I have another bias, my bias. I love data. I love looking at it. I love creating graphs. I like merging it into stuff, right? That's one of the Six Sigma things, right? And that's why I love AI so much. It's bringing so much to the Lean Six Sigma world. It's very, very exciting. And we talk about data analysis. Data analysis is different than data literacy. Data literacy, we can get away with doing presentations and talking a little bit about statistics. But data analysis is when we're getting in there and we're really slicing and dicing that data, looking for the gold in that data. You hear people say data is gold now, right? And understand that. But how do we slice and dice it? How do we use statistics? And how can we call out those meaningful chunks that we have in our data? And then we have innovation. Innovation is a great skill to develop, and it's a skill. There's a process associated. Way back in the day, we used to teach a framework called Design for Design for Six Sigma, and it was a structured approach for product development, understanding the customer's requirements. I know we have what is the lean startup, and we have all these things. We're talking about minimal viable products, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we at least we have some fundamental understanding of those customer requirements. And last but not least, strategic thinking, right? And everyone says they're a strategic thinker, but strategic thinking is more. It's often is associated with goal setting and creating goals and objectives and measures. That's not what strategic thinking is. Strategic thinking is much deeper than that. So let's go take a look at my little presentation here again, and we're going to talk about what is critical. I already said what are the key skills required. Critical thinking. What do you folks think? I can see there are a lot of people on this presentation right now. Critical thinking. Do you have it? Do you wish you had it? Do you wish your boss had it? Right? That's that's a great skill that we need to develop, and you can't just develop it once. You need to practice it. The complex problem solving. That's another thing. Everyone wants to be known as a complex problem solver, but once you get in there and start asking the right questions and digging into the problems, you'll find out that most people really aren't. They're good at jumping to their pet solutions, right? And their pet problems, but they're not really good at this complex problem solving. Data literacy. We're going to talk a little bit about data literacy today and what it means. That's a skill. In the age of AI, we're surrounded by data. We know that AI can do a lot of data crunching for us and pick out things and help us explain it. But at some point, you're going to have to understand that data, communicate that data, and talk to the statistics associated with that data. So statistical thinking is going to be critical, right? And the people in the Lean Six Sigma world have a leg up on that because it's all about data. It's about understanding our distributions in our data, more than just understanding averages. When people bring me a report and it has an average, I'm always like, "Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Give me something I can do something with." I want to understand the variation in there. I wanna know not just what the average person is feeling. What about the upper 20%? What are they experiencing? Or the lower 20%? That's statistical thinking, folks. If you can't answer those questions and you're showing up with averages and you don't understand the variation, you're gonna get buried by a critical thinker that is data literate. Um, so, data literacy, data analytics, of course. How do we slice and dice that data and call out interesting information? I'm telling you, AI is wonderful at it, but you're going to have to be better. That data is going to be brought forth to you, and you're going to have to figure out what to do with it, right? Innovation, that innovation skill. How do we innovate our products? How are you using AI and automation today? How are you taking advantage of it? This isn't about your company. This is about you. People, I talk to people every day. Have you used AI? Nah, my company won't pay for it, or my company doesn't like it. What about you personally? Have you taken the initiative to learn about AI and automation because that's required? Nah, yeah, my company won't pay for it. You're letting your company put boundaries around you, like a moat around your employment. You need to learn this, folks. Innovation and then strategic thinking. Strategic thinking is probably the toughest nut to crack because everyone claims to be a strategic thinker, right? When I start talking to people and I say, "Well, tell me about the five forces analysis that you did on here, the Porter model. What did you conclude from that?" Oh, well, people start stuttering and stammering. "Tell me about the pestle analysis for your industry. What do you really understand and know about that?" Okay. I said, "Tell me, have you done a blue ocean strategy? Where are the blind spots here?" "Nope." I said, "So what makes you think you're a strategic thinker?" And it's not that I'm trying to play stump the chump. I'm pretty good at that. But I want to know where you're coming from. So again, if you think who thinks they're going to succeed without having critical thinking skills? Who's going to think they're going to succeed without having formal complex problem solving skills? Who's going to think they're going to succeed without being data literate? And I'm not just talking reporting averages on a graph. "Oh, here's my little chart. Here's my average turnaround time. Isn't that sweet? It's better than last week's average," right? Data analytics. It used to be for the few. Now it's the many, right? We need to understand that data. How do we pull that data together? How do we cull it and how do we analyze it? Data analytics, also, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on, and then innovation and strategic thinking. So here we go. I wanted to just introduce a generic definition for data literacy. How would you define data literacy, right? If your boss came up to you and said, "Hey, we have this quiz. It's on data literacy. Let's see how well you do on it." Would you be panicked? Would you say, "Oh yeah, I got this now," right? But it's the ability to read, understand, create, and communicate data as information. Note here, statistical literacy helps with doing this and understanding data-based arguments. I would argue, do not tell me you're data literate and that you're great, the data-driven decision maker if you don't understand variation. If you don't understand basic statistics, please don't tell me you're data driven. If you're just looking at averages and a run chart and saying, "Oh, looks like we have a trend," that's cute. That's interesting, but that's not going to get you. And some of those components, of course, are recognizing data collection methods. How do we get this data? Is this data real? Where did it come from? What's the bias in this data? How can we make sure it's right? Data literacy is understanding the accuracy of that data we're received and that we're looking at. There are all sorts of methods that we can use. Bias gets interjected into our data. People will say, "Oh yeah, I excluded that. I didn't include that. It makes my numbers look bad." We have to know those things. And more importantly, we know that data has been tampered with. And there's a technique called excuse me, there's a technique out there that we can use called Benford's law to help us understand if larger data sets have been manipulated and tampered with. Now, how many of you have heard of Benford's law? If you haven't, you need to get on that bandwagon, folks, and understand if you're dependent on someone else's data, how do you know they haven't manipulated that data in a way for their own bias? And we see it every day. It's all around us. People looking at the same data come up with different results, different conclusions. So that's an aspect of data literacy. What do you think? There's a lot of you on the call right here. How many of you would agree that data literacy can be a problem and that you yourself can use a refresher in it, right? In the Six Sigma world, we're looking at data, we're graphing the data, we're coming up with descriptive statistics, not for fun, although it is. It's a lot of fun, but to understand that data and how we can make predictions about the probability of certain events occurring, the likelihood of those events occurring, and more importantly, now understanding if that data that has been shared with us has been tampered with. And we're seeing a lot of that tampered with. It seems like in today's day and age, no one believes the data except their own, which they tampered with, right? So as we're thinking about this, this is going to really improve our data-driven decision making. I'm telling you, don't talk to me if you don't understand the variation of your data. If you're bringing me a report and say, "Well, here are my average results. Here's my run chart. Here's my line chart. Um, aren't we doing a great job?" I would be really disappointed. And it's making sure that we have the right data, we interpret it, we understand the biases in it, so we can make the right data decisions. Sometimes we're not going to have all the data, right? And we're going to have to trust it and move forward. But at least let's be cognizant of the data that we have. Now, there's all sorts of ethical implications here, right? There are going to be biases in that data. And that's what I was talking about when we're using Benford's law. We can tell if it's been manually manipulated. There's going to be understanding fairness in this data. There's all this new stuff that's going on where we're going to weight things differently. We're going to be more transparent about it and how we're going to be accountable with data and AI systems. Eventually, over time, there might be some bias in that AI. I'm not saying there isn't, right? But we can look for it, we can scrub for it, and you have to realize a lot of these AI models that we use, you can give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down to improve what it's actually done. So there's some ethical implications in there as well. And then how can we use this to, this data literacy improve our employability? This is all about the employee, not about the employer, right? AI and automation, your employer might say, "No, it's not for us right now," but you have to know they're like, "Hey, how can I save money? Yeah, hey, what? I can do it faster with AI and automation? Oh, don't worry about it, folks. We're not going there." But having this data literacy skill is always going to be in demand as the routine everyday tasks that I talked about in the last video get automated and become the purview, if you will, of automation. So these are some of the main reasons here, the importance of having these skills, data literacy skills. And I'm going to talk about analytics later on. But in my world, in the Lean Six Sigma world, in training and certification, we're looking at that data. We're looking for anomalies in that data. We understand the distribution of that data. We're looking for those outliers, and those outliers can also be considered biases, right? Who would you have to agree with that, right? And we can find it and we can tease it out. There's a difference between data literacy and data analytics. You need to have both. Don't get me wrong. Data literacy is really about just understanding the data's role in decision making and recognizing when we have good data and how we can present and communicate that data. That includes, again, I want to make sure we're not skipping over this, understand having great statistical thinking and understanding variation and probability. If you don't have that, please don't, please go out to LinkedIn right now and take data driven decision making off of your resume if you don't understand variation, right? Come on, be real with Data analytics is more about understanding the tools and methods to do that detailed analysis, about extracting meaningful insights in that data. What are the hidden jewels in that data that we can exploit and use to our advantage? And having that skills is going to be critical because businesses, as they automate, as they get more data, as AI comes into their age, they're going to need to understand the anomalies in the data or the hidden gems that exist in that data, and they're going to ask you to call it out. So you might be able to find these hidden gems that somebody can do something with. Now, I've seen great data analysts that are poor complex problem solvers. Do not equate I'm a great data person with solving complex problems. You're the data is a one aspect of it, right? There's critical thinking associated with it, and the data analysts themselves are going to have to be better trained in understanding bias in the data, understanding how to find data that's been tampered with, right? One way is that Benford's law, understanding black boxes in the data. How many times has someone presented data to you and said, well, here's my data, look at all my correlations. You're like, oh, what's that input right there into this model? Oh, it's a proprietary black box model. So if you don't know what's in that black box, you can't trust that data. We have to understand, and there needs to be some transparency in that data, right? So that's what data analytics is about. I love getting the data and running analysis. And moreover, there are new tools out that you can if you constantly have and if you're in this unfortunate position where you're getting data that's not formatted in a way that's ready for analysis, right? You have to get an Excel spreadsheet. This is my favorite. Got to remove this row. I gotta change this. Got to change this type. I got to recode this. Let me put this formula in there. Just freaking error prone. Error on top of error on top of error. Let me make a drop down box here to do this. There are tools out there that you can use right now where you can take the time to set up the structure. Step one is we're going to do this. Step two is we're going to do this. Step three, we're going to do this. And you just take your file, drop it in, and you know that the data analysis is going to be repeatable. That means you can do it over and over and get the same result and reproducible. If you did it and I did it, we would come up with that same outcome. So there's a lot of great tools out there. And please don't tell me, oh, my company wouldn't pay for it. You know, "Oh, I'm not gonna learn this because it's not valuable to my company." Think about yourself, invest in yourself. If you're not willing to invest in yourself, why would a company invest in you, right? So, data literacy equips you to understand and communicate the data, and data analytics is more technical. You're digging into that data, you're manipulating that data, you're exploring these complex data sets, looking for correlation, looking for things that stick out, looking for opportunities, if you will, right? So we're mining that data to look for opportunities. And we're seeing a lot more of this data analysis coming to light. But we're talking about literacy here. I need you to think about this. Are you data literate? And that includes statistical thinking. Do you really understand the data that has been presented to you? If you're walking into a meeting and you have your PowerPoint up on the wall, right? And someone comes in and says and asks you a question, well, what's the probability of a customer experiencing X? And you can't answer that question. That's a question I expect everybody to be able to answer, but few can. You- They've just played stump the chump and they weren't trying to do it. They're probably looking for an honest answer and you didn't know your data well enough. We should know your data inside and out, including having the ability to understand the likelihood of events occurring. If you're just showing a run chart, a bar chart, and a graph chart and saying, here are my averages, we don't need you. AI can do that for me. I can drop that into Chat GPT say, "Hey, create a bar chart, graph chart for me. You're done. I don't need you, but I need more insight into that data and being able to have a more robust conversation. I need to know where that data came from. Is the data good? Is it bad? What biases exist in that data?" Those are all the things a data literate person comes into. If you go into a meeting like, "Oh, I'm not really sure where that data came from. What biases do you think are in the data?" "I don't know. The quants gave it to me. I got it from Dan's team." You're in trouble. So I want you to think about those things. In this age of AI, critical thinking is needed. And we think we're better critical thinkers than we are. And critical thinking requires constant attention and training. Complex problem solving, all of us, those are skills we all like to boast about having and think we have. Think about how good are you at complex problem solving? How good are you at defining a problem? How good are you at identifying the potential root causes? Do you have a systematic way of narrowing down all the possible root causes to the vital few? And can you explain that to someone? How good are you at exploring all the improvement opportunities and then explaining to someone how you landed on this improvement opportunity? Those are all part of critical problem solving. When I talk to a person, I'm like, okay, what was the problem exactly? Okay. How did you measure that? We're not quite sure. I said, oh, great. But here's the problem. Okay, what were the other root causes or other potential problems that can manifest itself in this result? I'm not really sure. This is the one we decided to go with. Well, how did you decide on that? All those things you go into a complex problem solving that people claim to have, and you're asking the question not to play stump the chump, but you're asking the question to see how critical think. Are they really a critical thinker? And how well are they at complex problems? The data literacy, show me your data. Do you understand your data? Can you communicate it well? How about you go into these meetings and there's 1,000 graphs in there. And I'm like, is that actionable? No. Is that actionable? No. That's nice trivia. That's interesting. Right? Understanding your data, including the statistics behind it in case someone wants to know the likelihood of this event occurring. That's up to you. The onus is on you. And then, of course, the data analytics, that's gonna as AI and automation take away the routine grunt work and all the project management stuff. Now we're gonna need people to get all that data that big data is creating for us and sifting through it and finding those gems, right? Needless to say, innovation is going to be critical. How are you taking advantage of this for your company? "Oh, my company doesn't like it. They're against it." Well, how are you thinking about products and services and skills that are going to be required at a different company or organization? We're not guaranteed employment for life, unless, of course, you work for the government. But you have to be able to take these skills with you. And then, of course, the strategic thinking. I'm going to hit strategic thinking later on because that's the one that probably rubs me the most. Are all the people that claim to be strategic thinkers that really aren't strategic thinkers? They don't even have a clue of understanding what real strategic thinking is. Setting goals and objectives, that's great stuff, but it's not strategic. It's not strategy. Strategy is something totally different. So I'd love to hear from you. This is The World According to Dan. And again, we had another reading from the book of Dan. I hope you found it useful. Like, subscribe, or whatever they say about this. I'll be putting out another video here shortly on the importance of data analytics in the age of AI and why you should invest in yourself. And so far, everything that we've talked about dovetails nicely into like the Lean Six Sigma training that I get. Why wouldn't you come to training or get training that's going to force you to become a better critical thinker? Teach you the skills and methods of being a complex problem solver, understanding, being more data literate, being able to analyze data better, right? Using a method and measurement techniques to innovate, right? And strategic thinking, that's something separate that we will be talking about. That is a skill, though, we're seeing that's in great demand. All you have to do is go on the web right now and say, give me a list of jobs that AI and automation are impacting, right? And if you're a white collar worker, say white collar jobs. If you're a blue collar worker, say blue collar jobs. And then sit back and watch the list that comes back. You can type it into Google, you can type it into any of these large language models. I bet you're going to be surprised. And put in there, what are the skills that are going to be taken over by AI and automation, and see if that's your skill set. Because we need to be thinking about the future. This is changing the world. We're not going to go back to digging ditches with spoons. AI and automation's here. You need to leverage it. You need to be ahead of the curve, and you need to ensure for your family, for your own health and well-being, that you're prepared to leverage this, or it's going to boot you right out of your organization. So, I can see that we have a lot of people here. No questions. I appreciate you taking the time to understand this. If you have any other suggestions or ideas for topics to cover, I have huge number of interesting low cost tools to get you started on this journey that you can buy low cost tools that exist to get you started on this journey and help you upskill, if you will, or for many cases reskill what it is, what you're going to need to be successful. So unless there's any questions, I don't see any questions in the chat. Hopefully you're sitting back and you're like, really thinking about this and saying, "How do I leverage this, and how do I take care of this, and how do I ensure my family is taken care of?" Right? So that's just not you, it's your family. You know, I hear these horror stories, not horror stories. I love what's happening in with AI and stuff like that. But there's people that are just sitting back being wiped out because they're not anticipating this change, they're not taking it serious, and they're not willing to invest in themselves. So go ahead, invest in yourself, invest a little time in learning these tools. You can learn them online. Research the tools that can help you leverage your job in a better way. Don't wait for your employer, right? If you're not doing something because your employer won't pay for it, that's horrible, right? Oh man, I could have done so. You're going to tell your kids, I could have done something great in my life, but my employer wouldn't let me. Right? That's the worst thing in the world to do. And remember, I call it the BP moment, the Brady Purdy moment. Everyone knows who Tom Brady is. Everybody should know who Brock Purdy is. When they got the tap on the shoulder when it was game day to come in the game, they were ready to go. AI and automation is going to present a new tap on the shoulder. Are you ready to go, or are you going? So have a great one, folks. We'll see you. I'm going to be putting out another presentation on data analytics, man. Oh, I can't wait. I love that stuff, and I hope you do too. So, ciao. Have a great weekend. Well, I'm going to put another slide out before the weekend, but we'll see you soon. Like, subscribe, share, comment, do whatever it is they tell you to do. Peace out.